Hi guys, this is Vidas,
And Ausra.
and let's start episode 63 of Ask Vidas and Ausra podcast. And today's question was sent by Kaya, who is helping actually to transcribe our podcast for us. She is very helpful and very accurate transcriber. So thank you so much, Kaya, for doing this. And now back to her question. She asks, when do you usually register a piece? Before or after you learn to play all the notes? I think registering a piece can be the most fun part of preparing a performance, but maybe it should be saved for last. If my piece is very loud, I will usually practice using softer registration, but this means I get used to the quieter sound and start to prefer it. I don't know. What is your opinion? Thank you for all your work. It's wonderful to read all of your posts. I especially like your new podcast feature with text instead of just audio. She's wonderful, right?
Yes,
Because
she is.
without her help, it wouldn't be possible.
Yes. And excellent question, actually. Very interesting question.
Let's start with how we do it. Okay, it's not necessarily the only way, um, because some people advise to analyze the piece and know how the piece is put together right away, and even to figure out the registration just before you learn the notes. And some of them do the notes first and decide on the registration later. So how do you do it, Osha?
Well, usually I learn music first, actually.
But while learning notes, don't you sometimes think, oh, I'm in my upcoming performance on this particular instrument, I'm going to use this combination or that combination, or manual change. I will go to the third manual instead of the first manual.
Of course, I always keep that in mind because otherwise I would not know how to play. But for example, as Kaya mentioned, that if it's a loud piece and she practices it on a soft stops, that she will get used to that sound and she will prefer it. I would still suggest to play like piano pieces on a soft stops during just regular practice. Not all the time, but most of the time, because otherwise you could just hurt your ears, and that wouldn't be good. But while playing even with like 8-foot flute, you still can imagine that you're playing organo piano, because when your touch even will be different, a little bit different.
Absolutely.
But I always register the final version of a piece when I'm on actual organ on which I will be performing that piece.
Do you sometimes register on the table in your head
Yes, I do that sometimes.
to save time?
Yes, and then I just have to adjust some things when I get to a real organ. Because you are in sort of a luxury situation if you know the instrument on which you will be performing in advance, and I mean in a practical way that you have played it. But most often for like concert organists, you can only imagine what you will get. Of course you see this like specification list, but you still cannot hear the actual sound until you get to the organ. And most of the time you have like one or two rehearsals, sometimes even almost none rehearsals before your actual performance, such a live. So you sort of do your imaginary registration, and then you do the real one when you get to the real instrument.
Mm-hmm. And the more experience you have with pipe organs, then the more closer to reality your mental preparation will be.
Yes.
Although there are exceptions, right? You discover that, let's say, this principal is not loud enough, or this flute is not, making sound that you want.
Yes.
So you need another combination. The reed is out of tune, for
Yes,
example.
sure. And especially when you are learning pieces where you have to use like two manuals at the same time. Try various combinations when you practice on your home organ or your school organ, because otherwise it might be very hard for you to switch to change the manuals, for example. Imagine you are playing like trio sonata, let's say by Bach, yes, and you always play the right hand on the second manual and left hand on the first manual. And when you go to the real organ where will you be performing this piece, you see that it has to be the other way, left on the top manual and right on the lower manual. It might be a problem for you to do that.
Absolutely.
So practice all these combinations. And of course, if you have an regular access to your organ where you will be performing that repertoire, then it might be a good idea, to register pieces right away and to practice in that way.
And talking about trio sonatas and this kind of texture, make sure you practice also dropping one octave lower one part.
Yes, because you might need that too when register.
Probably the left hand part, because otherwise you get
Yes.
cross relationship between hands. But 8-foot stop sometimes is not as beautiful as 4-foot stop. So you could
Sure.
choose 4-foot registration, but then you need to drop one octave lower your one voice.
But as Kaya mentioned in her question, registering the piece is really the most fun part of all the organ playing, because each time you can explore and find new colors. And it's sort of strange for me that some organists keep the registration. For example, we are performing a recital in one place and we write down that registration and try to keep it for the rest of your life. I'm sort of don't like doing that, because if I will come back to that instrument, let's say after 10 years, it does not mean that I will register it in the same way, because maybe my taste will have changed in that time.
Or your level might have grown too.
Yes. So I would suggest each time you would do your own new registration.
For example, right now, as we are recording this, we're mentally preparing for our upcoming performance in Poland on the Hildebrand organ from 1717. So that was Bach's day and age, Baroque organ. And we're practicing sometimes at the home, sometimes at St. John's Church here in Vilnius, but always mentally thinking about Poland now.
Yes.
Right? That's how we save time, that's how we save energy and prepare for the real situation. It doesn't mean that we will be 100% right, but we will have a starting point from which to begin practicing and rehearsing in Poland.
Yes. And another important thing, that you always have to choose your repertoire for a particular organ. It just amazes me how sometimes organists try to play all kind of repertoire on one instrument. I mean, it's good if you are in the United States and you have sort of universal organ on which you can play any kind of music, but in that type of instrument, I don't think that any music will sound
Equally well.
Yes. But still, it's possible to register and to play it. But otherwise, if you are playing on the historical organ, or on the replica of historical organ, you have to choose your repertoire right, because you cannot play each piece of music on any instrument. That's just impossible.
Nevertheless, for example, a lot of organizations prefer to have an eclectic instrument, and I've just read guidelines for AGO composers competition, right? You can compose organ music and receive a prize if you select it. So they want this music to be able to be performed on any type of instrument, mechanical, electromechanical, baroque, romantic. There, you should you should write a piece which would fit any type of organ. That's kind of silly, right?
Yes, I could not agree more.
But that's life, right? That's their requirement. So sometimes you have to make those hard decisions if you want to have the most opportunities in life, at least at first, when you don't have so many opportunities. But always think about the target organ when you will be performing in public, and that way your registration work will become very efficient.
Yes.
Thanks, guys. I hope this was useful to you, and please send us more of your questions. We love helping you grow. Okay, this was Vidas.
And Usha,
And remember, when you practice,
miracles happen.